60-day session, and it is called supplemental budget. It is not supposed to be new big changes. It usually adjusts for different pieces. The governor's budget, it was the first one that he wrote in full. He had an entire year to write it and to learn from the different agency heads that he appointed. And it had a big problem in it for us in the House, and then it took $400 million out of MOTCA and used to help with the operating budget. That's the monotoxics control account. And it's the closest thing we've got to a tax on oil, and put in place in, I believe, 1988 by voters. And so that made it difficult for us to pass a budget. We balance our budgets, unlike Washington, D.C. We're required to. And so that $400 million has been a little bit of what we've been sorting out in the supplemental budget about whether to do anything. This short session, and with the elections looming in the fall, we don't often talk about the elections, but with the elections clearly on everybody's horizon, a lot of the discussion in Olympia has been about what positions do we take, whether we're Republicans or Democrats, to create contrast with the other side so that people know where we stand. And the Republicans are doing the same thing, the Democrats are doing the same thing. In some ways, it's easy to see the contrast between the Republican-controlled Senate and the Democratically controlled House. And so there's some of that. Some would call it posturing, some would call it about high water mark, setting the standard. A lot of things that we're not going to agree on also just die. And so if we know of a coalition or a stakeholder that doesn't like a policy, then it just doesn't make it out of committee, it doesn't progress at all. I mention this because we are now after cutoff. So we've got these very strict deadlines. There's a deadline for getting bills out of committee. There's a deadline for getting them out of the fiscal committee. There's a deadline for getting them out of the House of Origin. And we've passed that House of Origin cutoff. So where nothing is ever really dead until sine die, things do die and the bills aren't going to progress any further. The fights also kind of roll, because if I start with 7 bills and I've only got 1, or if I have none, then the fight moves to the next thing. So that's sort of some perspective on where we are. We are now starting to hear bills from the other House. So we're starting to hear Senate bills this week in the House, and the Senate's starting to hear our bills, I hope. Not as many, of course, because we only got 100. It's a big difference. Last Thursday, I think I heard 25 bills in my committee and exec'd out 23. And it moves very quickly at that cutoff period. The DREAM Act passed last year with a 77 to 23 vote out of the House. Passed this year with 71 to 20 votes out of the House again. It was a big bipartisan bill, and it passed this year on the very first day of session, which nobody can remember a bill ever passing on the first day of session. I first introduced this bill in 2007, and it didn't go anywhere. It got a hearing in committee because the chair was nice, and then it died. And it sort of got introduced and didn't go anywhere for many years until this session. It went to the Republican-controlled Senate, and all the indications were that it was not going to move. I sat down with Republican Senator Barbara Bailey. She did not move the bill last year. She told me, no carver in a coffee shop, she had no intentions of moving the bill. But this is part of the process. People were involved. People talked to the senators. They talked to the Senate on both sides. I mean, that's where the fight went, because we moved it out the first day. And it came out of the Senate with a 35 to 10 vote. And it's great to work on a piece of legislation where you can bring people together. And the governor's supposed to sign it this week. He's got 5 days. And so they're shooting for Wednesday. And it's really exciting. And we did it on the first day in the House. The first day we could consider Senate bills, we did it on the first day of Senate bills. And it's about creating opportunity. Not everybody's happy. That's why there are no votes. And it also shows there's a good, vibrant discussion. But we're trying to help online students get access to financial aid. We're helping military folks get access to financial aid. And these kids that have grown up in our communities that we know a lot of them exist in Renton and live in Tukwila as well, in South Seattle. These kids may not have papers, they didn't decide to come to the U.S., but they've done well, they've got the right schools, contributed to our communities, and now this gives them the opportunity to compete for financial aid. So it's a big win for these students in creating opportunity.
All right, I took a few transportation and education questions since those are my committees. The first one was how concerned are you about the cost overruns and taxpayer risks from the Seattle Tunnel project? Good question. One of the things I like about this project is it was a design-build project. So for most of the projects we've done in the past, the Washington State Department of Transportation designs it, and then the contractor builds it. So if there's a problem with the design or a flaw in the tunnel digging machine, then who would be on the hook? The state. In this case, it's a design build, so the contractor designed and built is building the project. Theoretically, the cost overruns would fall onto them. We also have something written in on the cost overruns falling to Seattle. I don't know that that's going to be able to be, I don't think we'll be able to hold them to that. But the hope is, and what we're hearing, is the design build process, it should be that overruns would be on the contractor, but it remains to be seen. We need some more time. Yeah.
Yeah, real quick. I'm really concerned that the contractor could very well go bankrupt, and then if that happens, then what happens to it?
So I think we need to wait and see what these cost overruns really are. We don't really know that yet. If it's a large, they do have some money set aside in the contingency fund for this type of thing, like tunnel digging stops building, and they're within the time frame of the warranty on the machine. So there's a couple things that are going well for us on that. Education-wise, really quickly on the paraeducator bill, how will paraeducators pay for additional schooling? So the hope is they wouldn't, like a paraeducator that would like to become a teacher, right now has to pay for all their schooling. But we would hope that we could find some way of giving them some credit for what they're doing right now. So it would actually lessen their costs that they currently be paying to do something. Oh, this is an easy one. What is the current status of educators' COLAs? So teachers, I'm not sure if you know or not, we passed as a state the statewide COLA for teachers, cost of living adjustment every year for teachers. That was over a decade ago, almost 2 decades ago. And so every year, teachers were getting a raise based on the cost of living. So when inflation goes up to get a raise, the last 6 years now, the legislature has said, we don't want to give you that raise, and so they haven't. And I think when you look at the numbers, teachers, because of that, lost out like 15% of their income over that time period. And there's a big push this year to bring the COLA back a year earlier than maybe was planned. I think we need to wait for the budget process to play out, so I'm hopeful that Ross Hunter will have it in his budget. The House budget and the Senate budget, that's where it's going to lie. If there's money in the budget for it, I think there's going to be a big push and a heavy pressure to get a COLA for our teachers. One more, can you speak to the updating of Washington State's high school graduation requirements? I'm not sure if you all know, the state requirement is for 20 credits right now to graduate. Most districts have 22 at a minimum to graduate, but the state is trying to move to a 24 credits to graduate system, including an extra math and an extra science. Some districts already have some of those in place, but there's a lot of support in doing that. I think I have some trepidation still just with the amount of money it will cost to create extra classrooms to deal with these issues, and the large class sizes and the lack of counselors to maybe help kids get to graduation. So I'm hoping that we could, the earliest this will be implemented is for the class of 2019. So I think 7th graders. There's 7th graders now. So we have a little bit of time to figure this out, but it's coming soon, and I'm trying to do the best I can to get us prepared for that and to be in a spot where we're ready to help all those kids through to graduate with 24 credits. Because I think it's something we're going to. We have to be ready for it.
Right now, this would impose a 24-hour graduation requirement, as Representative Bergquist said. My view is that right now, we have kids who are coming from disadvantaged communities or backgrounds or children of color who are failing to graduate at astonishing rates, even at the 20 credit requirement. So if we can't even get those disadvantaged communities, those students, over the 20 hour, why are we going to raise it to 24? Until we can adequately fund basic education and get kids to graduation under current standards, I don't think that we should be looking at washing out even greater numbers of disadvantaged students. That's why I was opposed to that bill. Please explain the Senate's good faith defense in Senate Bill 5158. So if you go to ledge.wa.gov, if you go into this left column, you'll see a thing called Bill Information, okay? Click on that. By the way, this is the main legislative webpage. You can get to anywhere in the legislature's whatever, through this page. So you go right, I clicked on bill information, you click on search bill number, and let's search 5158. Creating good faith defense for certain minimum wage and overtime compensation. Oh, that's the minimum wage one. Okay. And if you, this is called the bill history page, so it will tell you everything the bill has done. And by the way, see this little orange thing here? If you click on that, you can sign up to get an email whenever this bill does anything. If it gets assigned to a committee, if it gets passed out of committee, you will be sent a notification. So you can track any bill that you're interested in through this, and they will notify you when something is happening with that bill. So if it's scheduled for a hearing, and you want to go down to Olympia and testify on a bill, that will let you know when that bill is being heard. Okay, so if you go down here, you can see it was pretty much a party line vote in the Senate, 25 to 23. And if you click on view roll calls, you can see exactly how everybody voted. So you can see these are all, this was a party line vote. And here I am. This bill, and you can click on that Senate bill report, and what this bill does is allow employers to not have to pay back wages if they feel like they shorted their employee in good faith. To me, the law is the law. If you owe wages, you ought to pay those wages if you're due. That's why it was a party line vote. It's workers' rights versus corporate rights. It kind of boils down to that. Paid sick leave. This is a House Bill 1313, so I can't speak to that because I haven't seen the bill yet. It hasn't come over from the House yet. The last one is kind of a toss-up. I mean, it's addressed specifically to me, but it says, how could your constituents help you the most? What a great question. I'm a community organizer, and it's all about building power in the community. So the way that you can help me as the representative of our community is to build power for our voice in our communities. And that extends beyond the 11th district. If you've got friends, relatives, acquaintances, co-workers who live in outlying districts, talk to them. Talk to them about these bills that you're concerned about and why you think that they're important and how you think, convince them that they should talk to their legislators. And that's how we start building power.
I hope to agree with as many constituents as I can, as often as I can. I think that's how we get elected, and that's how we stay in touch with our communities. That's not always the case, and so if we are going to disagree, I hope that you understand kind of how I came to some of what my thought process was, how I came to some conclusion, how I voted for things. I'm not always right. There are literally hundreds and hundreds of people that will tell you exactly where you're wrong every time you say something dumb or sponsor the wrong bill or whatever it is. And when it comes down to it, we have to hit a button, and it's red or green, and we got to take a stand, and it's very public, and then we hear from folks that disagree with us. So a number of these issues are very controversial. I apologize if we see things differently. I'm happy to explain more about why. I'm sure Steve and Bob feel the same way. These issues also are usually incredibly complex, and so a few minutes up here is not going to answer all of them. We could spend an hour face-to-face and probably wouldn't cover all the ground. So with that in mind, I thought I would kind of go through a lightning round since we're out of time. We didn't plan it to be out of time, but I thought for the general audience, you could sort of understand some of these other issues. So the question is, why did you vote for 2149 without a proper fiscal note, without a small business impact study? Why did the legislature protect 502 business models so law enforcement did not have to increase Next one also is all but 3 Democrats in the House voted to end medical marijuana. How can we support the Democrats when they don't support us? Will the Senate Democrats do the same? Medical marijuana has been an issue since the recreational marijuana issue passed the voters. It is not under the same regulation. It probably shouldn't be because it's medical. But how, if, why we should regulate medical marijuana has been a lot of discussion in Olympia this year and very passionate. The patients that benefit from medical marijuana do not want to come into the same regulatory structure as recreational. And a number of folks that see recreational as legitimizing recreational use will no longer be abusing the process of the medical marijuana study. The bill that was passed out is still controversial. There are a number of folks here that are not happy that I voted for it. I think that it was a compromise to move us towards a more standardized regulatory system so that patients can keep access to their medicines and recreational folks will fall under the 502 regimen. This is a brand new thing, and it is not going to go smoothly. I'll set the standard there. And there's going to be a lot of hard feelings, but passionate feelings on all sides of the issue. Colorado is making a move on this. It's a shift that hasn't happened in 80 years in the country, and this will continue to evolve. So I think that the legislation helped bring us towards what we need to do, which is better regulation in this brand new marketplace. And we are going to be open to continuing to change. Question about hemp legislation. There's a bill to authorize, legalize, standardize industrial hemp. Came through my committee. It died last year. This year I worked with the most conservative Republicans in the House, Matt Shea, Jason Overstreet, and David Taylor, to move the bill out of my committee. It's got a very large fiscal note. It would create a big seed bank at the Department of Agriculture. I didn't see the reason why we keep outlaw industrial hemp. Nobody wants to smoke when we're legalizing recreational medical. Drones also has been a big issue this year. There's also a lot of strong feelings, warm feelings. Nobody feels warm and fuzzy about some of these issues. There are a number of bills. The ones that Representative Morris drafted went through about 5, 6, 7 drafts. And so just keeping up with that debate and extra sensory devices and government regulation, what's a good government use, like fighting forest fires, and what's not, like tracking all of us. We passed some legislation out of the House as well. We think that to use a great cliche in Olympia, it puts good sideboards around the issue. And again, I think that as the technology moves forward, we'll see what's a good use and what's not a good use. Drones, hemp, marijuana. Mental illness. The cost of not treating mental illness exceeds the cost of treating mental illness. Mental illness is something that was not even considered much as a big issue when I first got to the legislature. We talked about how healthcare stopped at the neck, so it didn't include dental and dental or hearing or eyeglasses and mental health. We passed mental health parity. We really changed that discussion, and we have just changed the discussion about how do we help folks to stay compensated, and you give them a little bit of help, and then you don't have to catch them before they hit bottom, and you don't have to pick them up after they hit bottom. It's a huge cost to all of us, to their families, to them, to their employers, and to the community at large. So it's hard to measure the negative. It's hard to put enough money into things we care about, and that includes everything from education and early education, pre-K to helping the mentally ill. And we do still see stories in the paper about why it's important to help people stay compensated. Catholics were down in Olympia yesterday, 550 folks representing a number of different parishes, and this was one of their top issues as well. And it's something that a number of communities are talking about now. What's the Washington legislature doing about climate change? We've all decided to walk to work from here. And we've all decided to shut up more often because of the hot air. The House Democrats have been leaders on climate change. We still have some climate deniers that we work with, climate change deniers that we work with. And a couple of specifics are around the Renewable Portfolio Standard Bill. And we passed a bill out that looks out to when that ends, when we hit all of our marks in 2020 and say, okay, what's next? Let's start talking about that. We've got a number of work groups around climate change as well in Washington State. And so it helps having a governor where this is his top priority, and so we're able to line up with some of that. That fits in with everything else going on, and so you're not going to hear us touting one or two bills. If we could pass a bill and solve climate change, then sure, I would have done that already. There's a couple of other, so I'll keep going through the easy ones. Mark Elias has a bill about sexual orientation and Cody's Reproductive Parity Act. There's a couple of other questions about religious freedom and conscientious objection around elective abortions and having businesses support gay weddings. The Elias actually bill is an easy one. It passed out of the House with a bipartisan support. There's this therapy that some folks use on people to change them from being gay to not gay. And it is often being done by people with no certification, no training. So the bill says you shouldn't do this to some of these kids. You shouldn't do it to any kids under 18. And we had Republicans support the bill because they heard the testimony about it. So that actually has very little to do with the issue of being gay or not gay. It has to do with how people treat minors and whether minors have any control over that. I suspect that the bill does okay in the Senate as well. It certainly helps the prime sponsor move over to the Senate. Law of the land now is around protection, equal rights around civil rights and marriage equality in our state. I've continued to talk to a number of folks about not being a party against conscience. But you can have a conscience and you can object to something, but you have to pay a cost. And the example I give is sort of Vietnam War. You don't have to go fight in Vietnam, but there's a cost and you go to jail. And so you can not do something, but there's a cost. Then you don't have to abide by that standard, but you pay the cost. And so I think that's where I would come down on if your business doesn't want to give flowers to a gay wedding, first they probably don't want you involved in their wedding. Maybe they don't have a choice. If they don't have a choice, then I think that there's a cost to not adhering to the law of the land. These bills are passed by overwhelming majorities in our communities. We are not other states, and you see the turn of history on this issue as an example. That does not mean that people do not feel very strongly on the other side of it. And they do, and I hear from them, and I do not dismiss those very strong, passionate feelings. The law of the land is equal protection, and it is about civil rights protection, and it is about legalization of abortion in our state, in our nation. And again, that doesn't mean you have to agree with these things, but you do have to agree with the law of the land. The RPA, in some ways, it is an insurance bill, and we don't have out-and-out fights about abortion in Washington State and the legislature. All of these issues also decided by the voters and not by guys like me in dark suits. These were decided by the voters on a number of occasions, and so I'm very reluctant, since they elect me, to tell voters if they're doing things wrong. The RPA is an insurance cleanup bill around the Affordable Care Act. It takes a current practice and makes sure it's protected. For those of you that don't like the RPA, the Reproductive Parity Act, it's not going to pass, so you can all calm down a little bit because of the Senate. The House has passed it a number of times. I support it. It simply says if you provide maternity care, then you also have to provide family planning and abortion services. I think that my concern about it is it's an insurance bill, and I will never use maternity care. My wife did, but that's part of insurance. It's something that you hope you don't have to use, and you pay for things that you hope you might not need. And I think that's the subtlety on the issue. Is it's about making sure that insurance is covering what people want. And so there are a number of businesses and individuals that have written to me and said, why do I have to pay for abortion? And you're not paying for abortion. You're paying for the services you get in that coverage, in that insurance plan. And that's what you want for your employees. Just because other services are available doesn't mean you're paying for those. I mean, it's easy to make that argument. It's not a crazy argument, but it is not the way I read that law, not the way I see current practice. And again, these will be issues that will continue to unfold as we do something that hasn't ever been done in this country, which is the Affordable Care Act and giving access to more people around health insurance. It's a big deal. There are a lot of fights about it nationally and locally. I don't think that this fight is as big as it has been made into, or maybe it shouldn't be. That's not to say that abortion is not a big fight, because this bill is an insurance coverage bill. It's a cleanup
around practice versus current statute. And so it's interesting watching how these things take on new life, some of these questions. Public pensions. The question here is, what can we do to control costs of public? Our public pensions are better funded than almost everybody in the state, and there are a number of states across the country whose pensions, like Illinois, are not only in the tank, but incredibly expensive, rich benefits. Someone asked me what pension plan I'm in. I'm in PERS 3. Steve's a teacher. We've got other teachers in the legislature that are in the teacher's pension. We've got legislators that are in the TIA-CREF and the firefighter's pension. So anything we do to pensions, it affects me. My pension is no more rich than anybody else that works for the state. Now, with the Boeing vote around the machinists and the shift to 401k, there's a continuing discussion in Olympia about shifting to a 401k model. And I don't think that's going anywhere, but that is part of this whole discussion about no, it sounds like somebody doesn't like that idea. Gas tax. You know, the gas tax is an issue because you get to see it at the pump. The House has passed out a transportation package where it's been a year, but Steve, what was the gas tax increase in the House? 10 cents?
10.5 in the House, 11.5 in the Senate.
So, and we haven't raised the gas tax in over 10 years. It was 13 years before that. Every time you see an orange cone on the side of the road, that's a job that helps out the folks in the neighborhood. And I try and talk, the gas tax is you see it at the pump, right? You see how much you're paying. And at the same time, gas goes up and down. I drive back and forth to Olympia. I can tell you every gas station between here and Olympia. And I can tell you most of the prices. And I can tell you that there's more than 10-cent deviation between here and Olympia. That's 52 miles from my house down there. I think the oil companies do very well for themselves. It's okay to make a profit, but they do very well. And having 10 cents go to jobs in our community and create better infrastructure and making sure some of that goes towards transit is not an unreasonable ask. We haven't done that in 10 years. Again, people hate paying taxes. I hate paying taxes, but I see the benefit, and the benefit here is jobs in our community and better services. So with that fun downer of a note, unless you'd like to, we'll be around for a while, and there are tours. Martin, you all for tours. You've all got our cards, and a lot of you write to me. That's how I know you by face, right? I see in the community. And so many of you know I write back, right? Anybody got a note from me? Okay. Oh, good. All my friends are in the front. Thanks. Keep the angry people back there. So I read everything that comes in, and it is an enormous amount of work, and I love it because people are seeing and I'll take the hard questions because you want these questions answered. I'm happy to answer other questions. It's an 800 number. It's an email. If you put your address on there, I will send you a note back. Doug's been